The aircraft moved gently through the sky, floating above the clouds at exactly 30,000 feet. From the windows, the world below looked unreal. Soft white clouds stretched endlessly, glowing under the afternoon sun. Inside the cabin, everything felt ordinary, peaceful, safe. Passengers were settled into their seats, lost in their own small worlds. A middle-aged couple shared earbuds, smiling softly as music played between them. A young boy pressed his face against the window, pretending the clouds were mountains. Business travelers typed emails, unaware they were thousands of feet above the earth. Someone laughed quietly at a joke. Another passenger stirred sugar into a cup of coffee, the spoon clinking gently against the paper cup. It was just another flight, just another day. Emma walked slowly down the aisle, pushing the beverage cart with practiced ease. Her movements were calm, almost graceful. She had learned this rhythm over time, the gentle sway of the plane, the narrow aisle, the polite smiles exchanged with strangers. Most people didn't know this was her first year as a flight attendant. Before this job, Emma had been a waitress in a small roadside cafe. She knew how to smile even when she was tired. She knew how to stay calm when customers were difficult. She knew how to listen. That was why the airline had hired her, not because she was fearless, but because she was steady. She poured coffee for an elderly man sitting by the window. "Cream or sugar?" she asked. "Just sugar, sweetheart." He replied with a warm smile. She handed him the cup, smiled back, and moved on. As she passed through the cabin, Emma noticed the small details most people ignored. The faint hum of the engines, the seatbelt signs glowing softly above, the quiet breathing of a sleeping passenger. Everything felt normal, predictable, too normal. She reached the back of the cabin and turned around, scanning the rows one more time. No complaints, no call buttons lit up, no reason to worry. Then it happened. At first, it was just a sound, sharp, sudden, and wrong. Beep, beep, beep. The alarm cut through the cabin like a blade. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Laughter vanished. Heads turned instinctively toward the front of the plane. Emma froze. She had heard alarms before. Most were minor, seatbelt warnings, routine alerts, but this one was different, louder, more urgent. It wasn't meant for passengers. It was coming from the cockpit. The aircraft gave a slight shudder. Nothing dramatic, just enough to be noticed. A ripple of unease passed through the cabin. People exchanged confused looks. "Is that normal?" a woman whispered to her husband. Emma felt her heartbeat quicken. Her training told her to stay calm. Alarms didn't always mean danger, but something in her chest tightened. Seconds passed, then the intercom clicked on. A soft crackle filled the cabin, followed by a voice that was not the captain's. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice hesitated. Emma's stomach dropped. This wasn't right. The voice continued, shaky but controlled. "This is your senior flight attendant speaking." Passengers sat up straighter. Phones were lowered. Coffee cups were placed down. There has been an unexpected situation in the cockpit. Emma felt the air grow heavy, like the cabin itself was holding its breath. "Both pilots are currently unconscious." The words echoed through the aircraft. Unconscious. For a moment, no one reacted. The sentence didn't make sense. It couldn't. Pilots didn't just pass out. There were two of them. There were rules. Procedures, safety systems. Someone laughed nervously. "That's a joke, right?" a man said out loud. But the silence that followed was terrifying. The intercom clicked off. No explanation, no reassurance. No plan. Emma felt her knees weaken. She grabbed the edge of a seat to steady herself. Around her, confusion turned into fear. "What do you mean unconscious?" someone shouted. "Who's flying the plane?" Another voice cried. The realization spread slowly, then all at once. No one. The cockpit door remained closed. The hum of the engines continued, but suddenly it sounded louder, harsher. Mechanical, cold. The plane was still moving forward, still cruising. But now it felt like a massive machine without a driver. A woman began to cry softly. A man stood up, his voice rising. "This isn't funny," someone explained. Emma forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Panic was contagious. If she panicked, everyone would. She walked forward, trying to keep her steps steady, though her hands were trembling. "Please remain seated," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We are handling the situation." But even as she spoke, fear tightened around her heart. She had trained for emergencies, turbulence, medical issues, evacuations, but this wasn't in the manual. She glanced toward the cockpit door. Behind that door were two pilots, trained professionals, the only people on board who knew how to fly this aircraft. And they were unconscious. A sudden thought struck her, sharp and terrifying. What if they don't wake up? The plane gave another small shudder. A few passengers screamed. Seatbelt signs flickered on automatically. The cabin, once filled with quiet comfort, now felt like a trapped room. No exits, no control, just sky in every direction. Emma swallowed hard. She was just a waitress once, just someone who served coffee and smiled. But now, at 30,000 feet, with 179 lives surrounding her, the silence felt heavier than gravity itself. And this was only the beginning. Panic spread through the cabin like wildfire. It didn't explode all at once. It crept, it whispered. Then it screamed. At first there were quiet sobs, someone pressing their face into their hands, someone else clutching a necklace and murmuring a prayer. Then the crying grew louder, voices overlapped, fear found its way into every row, every seat, every breath. A woman near the aisle began shaking uncontrollably. My kids, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. A man stood up despite the seatbelt sign flashing overhead. "Someone do something," he shouted. "This can't be happening." The calm, organized world of the airplane collapsed into chaos. The aircraft shuddered again, harder this time. A deep, unsettling vibration rolled through the floor, through the seats, into people's bones. The sound of the engines changed, still running, but no longer smooth. The nose of the plane dipped slightly. Someone screamed. Emma felt it instantly, not just the movement, but the meaning behind it. They were losing altitude. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Her hands trembled, fingers curling tightly around the edge of a seat. Every instinct in her body screamed the same word, run, but there was nowhere to run. She closed her eyes for a single second and forced herself to breathe. In and out, she could feel the fear pressing against her chest, heavy and suffocating. Her legs felt weak, as if they might give out beneath her. She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't a pilot. She was a flight attendant, no. A former waitress who had learned how to stay polite under pressure. This was beyond pressure. The plane shook again, more violently now. Overhead compartments rattled. A bag slipped free and fell into the aisle, startling a child into hysterical crying. "Mom, Mom!" the child screamed, clutching his mother's arm. The woman pulled him close, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers through tears. Emma looked around the cabin. Faces were pale, eyes wide with terror. People searched her face for answers she didn't have. "They're looking at you," she realized. "They think you know what to do." Her mouth felt dry. Another passenger shouted, "Are we going to die?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The plane dipped again, just a little, but enough to send a wave of panic through the cabin. Cups rolled off tray tables. A phone slid across the floor. Screams echoed. Emma felt something shift inside her. Fear was still there. It hadn't disappeared, but beneath it, something else was waking up. Memory. Her father's face appeared in her mind, clear and vivid. He had been a small, plain mechanic, the kind who smelled of oil and metal, hands always stained with grease. As a child, Emma used to sit on an old wooden stool in his hangar, watching him work. She didn't understand everything he said, but she listened anyway. "Planes don't forgive mistakes," he used to say gently, "but they reward calm." She could almost hear his voice now. Another memory followed, standing beside a tiny propeller plane, her father pointing at the dashboard. "This tells you altitude," he'd said. "This shows speed. And this is your attitude indicator. Never ignore it." She hadn't thought about those moments in years. But now, as the aircraft trembled and fear tore through the cabin, those memories came rushing back like a lifeline. The plane shook again harder, the sound of crying grew louder, a man vomited into a paper bag. Someone else shouted angrily, blaming the airline, the pilots, God, anything to make sense of the terror. Emma swallowed hard, her hands were still shaking, her knees felt weak, but she noticed something else too. She wasn't frozen, others were screaming, others were praying, others were paralyzed by fear, but she could still move. Why me, she wondered, then the answer came, quiet but clear, because someone has to. The cockpit door stood at the front of the plane, silent, closed, heavy. Behind that door was the truth, the unknown, the place where everything had gone wrong. Every step toward it felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff. Emma took one step forward, her legs trembled but they held. She took another. A passenger reached out and grabbed her arm. "Please," the woman begged, "don't leave us." Emma turned and placed her hand over the woman's. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. "I'm trying to help." She didn't know if it was true, but it sounded right. The plane dipped again. Screams followed. Emma continued forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. The aisle seemed longer than it ever had before. The air felt thick, difficult to breathe. Her heart pounded, her mind raced. What if I open the door and they're gone? What if I make things worse? What if I touch something I shouldn't? One wrong move. That thought echoed in her mind like a warning bell. One wrong move could end everything. She reached the cockpit door and stopped. For a moment she couldn't bring herself to touch it. Her father's voice came back again, calm and steady. "Fear is normal," he'd said once, "but panic is a choice." Emma placed her hand on the door. The plane shook violently, throwing her slightly off balance. She grabbed the handle, steadying herself. Behind her, 179 people were crying, screaming, praying, waiting for someone to save them. She took a deep breath and stepped toward the cockpit. The cockpit was nothing like Emma imagined. The moment she stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a heavy click, the world outside seemed to disappear. The cabin noise faded, replaced by a constant mechanical hum. Deep, relentless, alive. Panels surrounded her on all sides, glowing with colors that made no sense to her. Red, amber, green, lights blinked urgently, some flashing faster than others, as if arguing with one another. Warning lights, so many warning lights. The two pilots were slumped in their seats, motionless. One leaned forward slightly, his headset crooked, chest rising but shallow. The other's head rested against the window, eyes closed, lips pale. They were alive. That small detail felt like a fragile miracle. Emma's chest tightened as she forced herself not to panic. She had never been this close to the controls of a commercial aircraft before. Buttons, switches, dials, hundreds of them. Each one probably mattered. Each one could change everything. The plane shuddered again, sharper this time. Emma stumbled forward, grabbing the edge of a seat to keep from falling. "Focus," her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "Machines don't respond to fear," he used to say. "They respond to hands that know when to move." Emma didn't know, but she had to try. Her eyes fell on the headset hanging beside the captain's seat. Her hands shook as she lifted it, placing it carefully over her ears. It felt too big, too heavy, like a crown she never asked for. She swallowed hard and pressed the button she hoped was right. Hello, her voice cracked, static answered. Then, a voice, "Aircraft call sign, please respond." Emma froze, they were talking to her. She took a breath so deep it hurt. This is the flight attendant," she said. "I'm not a pilot." There was a pause, a long one. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest. Then the voice returned. Steady, calm, professional. "Okay, I hear you. You're doing great. Just stay with me." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "I'll do whatever you tell me," she said, her voice shaking. "Just please help us. We're here," the voice replied. "You're not alone." For the first time since the alarm sounded, Emma felt something close to hope. The controller's voice continued, measured and precise. "First, I need you to check the pilots. Are they breathing?" Emma leaned closer, hands trembling as she placed her fingers near the captain's neck. Yes, she whispered, both of them, but they won't wake up. Understood, leave them as they are, do not move them. Emma nodded, even though the controller couldn't see her. The plane lurched suddenly, nose dipping lower. Warning alarms blared louder, sharper. We're losing altitude, Emma said, panic rising again. I know, the controller replied. I see it on my screen. That's why we need to act quickly. Her eyes darted to the altitude display. Numbers were falling, too fast. Look straight ahead. The voice instructed. Do you see a screen with blue on top and brown on the bottom? Emma scanned the dashboard, her heart racing. Yes, I see it. That's your attitude indicator. I need you to keep the blue on top. Level the wings. Emma's hands hovered over the controls. One wrong move, her father's words echoed again. Respect the machine. She gently placed her hands where the controller told her. The yoke felt solid, heavy, resistant, like it didn't trust her. She moved it slowly. The plane responded. Just a little, but enough. The alarms softened slightly. The violent shaking eased. You're doing it, the controller said. Good, very good. Emma's arms burned with effort. Sweat rolled down her back. Every muscle was tense. I'm scared, she whispered. That's okay. The voice replied, fear means you care. Just keep listening. Minutes stretched like hours. Emma followed instructions she barely understood. Adjust this, check that, keep steady. Her mind screamed questions, but there was no time to ask them. The plane dipped again, harder this time. No, pull up gently. The controller said quickly. Emma obeyed, teeth clenched, heart racing. The aircraft responded, but not enough. We're dropping fast, she said, her voice breaking. I know. The controller replied, no longer hiding the urgency. We're going to try something else. Emma's arms trembled from exhaustion. Her shoulders ached. Her fingers were numb from gripping the controls too tightly. She glanced at the altitude again. Still falling. How much time do we have? She asked. There was a pause. Not much, the controller admitted. Her throat tightened. Images flashed through her mind, faces in the cabin, the crying child, the praying mother, the man who asked if they were going to die. 179 lives depending on her. The plane shook violently again. A piercing alarm screamed through the cockpit. Emma cried out, fighting to keep control. Stay with me. The controller said firmly, you're not failing, you're fighting. Her vision blurred with tears. Her arms felt like they were on fire. I can't hold this much longer, she whispered. Yes, you can, the voice replied. Because you're already doing it. Emma took a deep breath and steadied her hands. Outside the cockpit windows, clouds rushed past faster now. The sky felt closer, heavier. The margin for error was gone. There was no room for mistakes, and the next few moments would decide everything. Emma's hands were shaking so badly she could barely feel the controls anymore. Her fingers were stiff, her arms burning with exhaustion, her whole body trembling under the weight of fear and responsibility. Tears blurred her vision, streaking down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She couldn't. Every ounce of her focus was locked on the voice in her headset, the calm, steady voice guiding her through the final moments. Stay with me, the controller said softly. You're almost there. Almost, that word felt unreal. Outside the cockpit windows, the clouds were gone. The ground was visible now, too close, moving too fast. The runway appeared like a thin gray line stretching endlessly ahead, lights glowing like a path through darkness. Emma's heart pounded so violently she thought it might tear itself free from her chest. I see it, she whispered. Good, the controller replied. Keep your speed steady, gentle movements. You're doing everything right. Everything right. Emma let out a shaky breath. Her mind screamed that she was just a waitress, just someone who used to carry plates and refill coffee cups. Someone who had never dreamed of sitting in this seat, touching these controls, holding so many lives in her trembling hands. The plane shuddered again. Easy, the voice said. Small corrections. Trust the aircraft. Trust. Emma swallowed hard and nodded, even though no one could see her. She loosened her grip just slightly, easing the tension in her arms, guiding instead of fighting. The runway rushed closer. Lower the nose just a bit, the controller instructed. Not too much. Emma obeyed. Her breathing was shallow now, quick and uneven. Sweat soaked her uniform. Her hands felt numb, her shoulders screaming in pain, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. In the cabin behind her, 179 passengers were holding their breath. Some praying, some crying, some too terrified to move. Parents clutched children, strangers held hands. Every soul on board was bound together by one fragile moment. And Emma felt all of it. Prepare for touchdown. The controller said, "You're lined up perfectly, perfectly." The word sent a fresh wave of tears into Emma's eyes. The runway filled the windshield. "Now," the voice said. Just like that, the wheels hit the ground hard, loud, violent. The impact shook the entire plane. A deafening screech tore through the cabin as rubber met runway, metal screaming in protest. The aircraft bounced once, just once, before settling back down. Emma cried out, instinctively tightening her grip. "Brake gently." The controller said urgently, "Easy, easy." The plane slowed. The seconds stretched endlessly as the aircraft thundered down the runway, engines roaring, brakes glowing, momentum fighting against them with everything it had. Then slower, slower still. Finally the plane stopped. Complete stillness. For 1 second there was nothing. No screaming, no crying, no sound at all. Just silence. Emma sat frozen, staring straight ahead, her chest rising and falling in short, broken breaths. Her hands were still on the controls, locked in place, as if letting go might make the plane move again. "Emma," the controller said gently, "you did it. The words didn't register. You landed the plane." The voice continued. "Everyone is safe." Something inside Emma broke. She let go of the controls and collapsed forward, sobbing uncontrollably. Her body shook as weeks. Months of fear, tension, and disbelief poured out of her all at once. She pressed her forehead against the panel, tears soaking into her sleeves. She was alive. They were all alive. Behind the cockpit door, the silence shattered. The cabin exploded with sound. Cries of relief, laughter through tears, hands clapping, louder and louder, until it felt like the walls themselves were applauding. People hugged strangers. Some fell to their knees, praying openly, thanking God, whispering gratitude into the air. Others simply cried, unable to stop, overwhelmed by the miracle they had just survived. A child shouted, "We're okay, Mom, we're okay." The sound of hope filled the cabin. Emma slowly pushed herself upright, wiping her face with trembling hands. Her legs barely held her as she stood. She turned toward the cockpit door, opening it carefully. The sight stopped her breath. Every passenger was on their feet. They weren't screaming now. They weren't panicking. They were looking at her. For a moment no one spoke. Then the applause grew louder, stronger, a standing ovation. Emma shook her head weakly, tears falling again. "No," she whispered, "I'm not." But the words didn't matter. A woman pushed forward through the aisle, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed Emma's hands and kissed them. "You saved my children," she sobbed. "You saved all of us." Others followed, hands reaching out, voices thanking her, blessing her, calling her things she didn't believe she was. Hero, angel, miracle. Emma felt overwhelmed, almost dizzy. She backed against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor, hugging her knees, crying harder than she ever had in her life. She wasn't a pilot. She wasn't brave by nature. She was terrified. She had been terrified the entire time. But she hadn't run. Emergency crews rushed onto the runway. Paramedics entered the cabin, moving quickly toward the cockpit. The pilots were carefully taken away, still unconscious but alive. As the passengers slowly disembarked, many stopped in front of Emma. Some hugged her, some whispered thank yous, some couldn't speak at all. One elderly man pressed his hand over his heart and nodded at her. "I've lived a long life," he said softly. "Today, you gave me more of it." When the cabin finally emptied, Emma remained seated, staring at the floor. The noise faded, the adrenaline drained, exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She felt small again. Just Emma, just a waitress who once served coffee and smiled at strangers. But on that day at 30,000 feet, when fear filled the sky and hope seemed impossible, she chose to step forward. And because of that choice, 179 people went home. Emma closed her eyes, tears still falling. She wasn't a hero by choice. But sometimes the world doesn't ask who you are. It only asks what you're willing to do. And that day, one waitress saved 179 lives.